Friday, September 1st, 1939. Using the pretext of the Gleiwitz incident of the night before, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the veteran German battleship Schleswig-Holstein carries out the first naval attack of the war, shelling the Polish garrison at Westerplatte in Danzig, where it had been anchored since August 25th on a goodwill visit. At 5:10, Hitler broadcasts a radio message from the Reich Chancellery denouncing the violation of German sovereignty by Polish troops and stating that Germany will respond with force. At 5:20, without a formal declaration of war, 1,500 planes of the Luftwaffe begin aerial operations against Poland. Heinkel 111s, Dornier 17s, Messerschmitt 109s and 110s, and the fearful Junker 87B Stuka dive bombers managed to destroy half the Polish Air Force on the ground and create panic among the population, filling the roads with refugees. At 5:45, 1 hour later than schedule, the operation codenamed Case White begins. 53 divisions of the Wehrmacht, 1 million soldiers with thousands of panzers at their head, crossed the German and Slovak frontiers with Poland, putting into effect the new military tactic called Blitzkrieg, a perfectly synchronized combination of air and land forces. Saturday, September 2nd. The Polish Prime Minister, Felijan Sławoj-Składkowski, tells Parliament he has complete confidence in the nation's armed forces and expects they will inflict a defeat on the enemy that will put an end to the arrogant Hitler. But the Polish army is unable to match the might of the combined forces of the Third Reich and its new method of warfare. From the north, the west, and the south, the German armored divisions, especially Guderian's Panzer, advance rapidly in a pincer movement with the aim of surrounding Warsaw. Marines from the battleship Schleswig-Holstein and paramilitaries take the city of Danzig, while the governments of Britain and France decree general mobilization and send an ultimatum to Hitler demanding an immediate withdrawal from Poland.
The German Chancellor, Herr Hitler.
The Nazi leader responds by ordering the ships and submarines of the Kriegsmarine to begin a blockade of Britain with attacks against the Royal Navy and merchant ships supplying the island. Listening to foreign radio broadcasts is forbidden throughout Germany, and the frontiers are closed. Meanwhile, Italy declares its neutrality, and the Catholic world awaits the response of the Vatican. In the United States, George Marshall occupies the post of Chief of Staff. And while some German Americans call on the German people to rise up against Hitler and his government, others are involved in pro-Nazi activities. Sunday, September 3rd. Luftwaffe bombs have disrupted the communications of the Polish army. Its commander-in-chief, Marshal Edward Śmigły-Ritz, following the disaster of the Ułanos Cavalry Regiment in the area of Krojanty, the loss of Jablonka, and the defeat at Mlawa, orders his forces to retreat to a second defensive line, in the northeast to the river Vistula, in the north to the river Neru, and in the south to the river San. Hitler has rejected the British and French ultimatum. Both governments declare war on Nazi Germany, which is greeted with jubilation by the Poles and a shock to the Führer, who was convinced that a rapid victory over Poland and the agreement with the Soviets would limit the possibilities of intervention by the two Western democracies. London begins to prepare for enemy air attacks, while the Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, reshuffles his cabinet, bringing in people who have criticized his policy of appeasement. One of these is Winston Churchill, who is named First Lord of the Admiralty. While the Soviet Union warns that in the event of the conflict spreading, it will be obliged to review its frontiers. At 1930, U-30, captained by Fritz Julius Lemp, sinks the transatlantic liner Athenia 200 miles off the northwest coast of Ireland. Among the 118 people lost are 28 Americans. German propaganda tries to claim it is a ploy by Churchill to bring the United States into the war. The Battle of the Atlantic has begun. Monday, September 4th. Polish Air Force fighters and a brigade of bombers courageously take on the planes of the Luftwaffe, while the land forces attempt a counteroffensive against the divisions of the Wehrmacht north of Wrocław, Breslau. In France, thousands of citizens, afraid that their country is going to be caught up in the conflict, demonstrate in a number of cities with placards and banners declaring, "We won't be the first to shoot." An uncharacteristically cautious Hitler, aware of the attitude of the French, tells the U-Boot-Waffe that their submarines are not to attack ships sailing under the French flag. The Nazi leader knows that if the French army launches an offensive from the west, with the support of the British to help Poland, his days may be numbered. In Britain, the War Cabinet, which includes Winston Churchill, meets for the first time and takes the decision to arm merchant ships and oblige them to sail in convoy. Churchill warns that if Germany violates all the international conventions, Britain will not comply with them. Some hours later, U-33 sinks the British merchant ship Alligrove. In response to the escalation of submarine actions, the RAF sends a number of Blenheim and Wellington bomber squadrons to attack the German bases of Wilhelmshaven and Brunsbüttel, and the ships anchored there, including the battleship von Scheer. Tuesday, September 5th. The United States and Japan declare their neutrality. France warns it will not tolerate any violation of its frontiers, and General Maurice Gamelin, Chief of the General Staff, a strong advocate of a defensive strategy, as a preventive measure, orders the transfer of 9 divisions to the frontier, with Germany in a gesture of support for the Poles, which provides no real help. On Polish soil, General Heinz Guderian, the driving force behind the strategy of Blitzkrieg, steamrolls through the north of the country, while Walter von Praustich, chief of German land forces in charge of the overall operation, proposes to Hitler that they should speed up the research work on the A-4 rocket, better known as the V2. With the troops of the Third Reich only 40 kilometers from Warsaw, the Polish government abandons the city and heads for Lublin in the southeast of the country. The Nazi leader, convinced that France and Britain will abandon Poland, publicly expresses his wish to reach an agreement with Britain. The British government refuses to negotiate with Hitler and his regime, while the Admiralty reinforces the system of Atlantic convoys with escorts of cruisers and destroyers to protect them against the dangerous German submarines. U-48, commanded by Herbert Schütze, sinks the merchantman Royal Spectre 300 miles northwest of Cape Finisterre and sends an uncoded message informing the British of the location of the ship in order for them to rescue the survivors. Wednesday, September 6th. In Poland, the troops of General Wilhelm von List occupy the city of Krakow in the south, and the SS carry out mass assassinations on the population, Jewish and non-Jewish. Hitler is convinced he will reach an agreement with the British, as he believes Britain will not go to war against Germany once Poland is occupied by German and Soviet forces. World War will be avoided by the lack of boldness on the part of the British and French, he tells his generals, who are fearful of an attack in the West. Britain has not responded with the bombing of large German cities, and the ships of the Royal Navy are mainly being used as escorts for convoys or timidly trying to enforce a blockade on Germany. All this leads the Nazi leader to believe there will be no major confrontation with the British Empire. The French, meanwhile, have shown themselves to be passive and lacking in strategic ideas in their response to the actions of the Third Reich, and Hitler orders the Kriegsmarine to avoid sinking ships sailing under a French flag. The U-boat Waffe launches what will be its flagship, U-38, the first type IXA submarine, armed with 6 533mm torpedo tubes, a 102mm gun, and a 20mm anti-aircraft gun. In Britain, the RAF is reinforced with new Spitfire Mk Supermarine fighters, which will become the plane most used by the British over the course of the war, with 20,000 units being manufactured. Thursday, September 7th. In the early hours of the morning, following 7 days of fighting, German troops occupy the garrison of Westerplatte in the port of Danzig, heroically defended by Polish soldiers and volunteers. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe bombers, escorted by fighters, attack Warsaw and engage in battles with the old Polish Air Force, which fights bravely and tenaciously. The 5 armies that make up the Third Reich force continue their advance on the Polish capital in a pincer movement that traps all the enemy forces. Hitler tells the head of operation, von Breistich, that his troops are not to interfere in the actions of the SS in Poland. Reinhard Heydrich has ordered the liquidation of intellectuals, the middle and upper classes, Jews, politicians, military men, and anyone with high social status. The only ones who are to be allowed to live are the lower classes, who will serve as slave labor for Hitler's Germany. The ghosts of 1914 haunt the French army, commanded by General André Prételat, which crosses the German frontier and skirmishes with Hitler's troops around Saarbrücken, Saarlouis, and Zweibrücken in the vicinity of the Siegfried Line. In the House of Commons, there are vociferous calls for air attacks against strategic locations in Germany. But the planes of the RAF restrict their bombing to the island of Sylt to the north of Kiel.